My sister flirted with my boyfriend and attacked me when confronted. Drama erupted at my wedding when my parents forced a reconciliation. I'm 28, and my sister is 26. We haven't communicated for about 6 years because of a terrible tragedy, which I will explain in a bit. As we grew up, my parents, for whatever reason, never discouraged our intense sibling rivalry. They urged us to compete instead. In retrospect, I don't think that was a wise decision because it made us incredibly jealous of one another. If they had dealt with this sooner, maybe our relationship would have been better. We could sometimes put aside our differences while we were younger, but as we grew older, our hostility increased. When we got to high school, we didn't talk much to one another, and we both liked it that way. I only saw my sister when I returned home from college after high school. Compared to being with someone who was disagreeable all the time, this was a relief. I started dating my fiancé around the time I was about to graduate. After 3 years of friendship, he finally worked up the nerve to ask me outright before I graduated. I said yes, as we had been friends for years and I thought he was amazing. He and I moved in together after I graduated, after 3 months of dating. I made the decision to present him to my parents one weekend. It just so happened that my sister, who had just begun college, chose to stay at home that same weekend. With both of us present at the same moment, it was already a formula for disaster. My life was going great at that point. I had my own apartment, a job, and a cute partner, but things weren't going as smoothly for my sister. She was disappointed that she couldn't get into her first choice of college and had to settle for her second. Later, my parents explained that she kept returning home so often because she was struggling to make friends at college. I could tell my sister wasn't happy when I told my parents about my relationship. As I introduced him, she pouted in the background. When I introduced her, she instantly turned on her charm. Despite the fact that my partner was aware of the strained relationship I had with her, it felt weird, but I tried not to let it upset me then. However, things became much stranger. While we were all sitting around, my sister continued trying to chat with my boyfriend, since she was too interested in his life. Despite our discomfort, neither of us spoke. Then she went too far during dinner. She started to overtly flirt with him in front of me. She was obviously trying to irritate me. She wasn't subtle. I attempted to ignore my family's turmoil for a while since I didn't want my partner to notice. I finally lost it, though, as she went on. I became enraged as she was openly flinging herself at him. I informed her that her behavior was disgusting and told her to stop. She continued to speak to him while rolling her eyes. That's when I lost it. I screamed at her, telling her that since she was making him feel uncomfortable, she should respect him as he was my guest. Even worse was her reaction. She remarked with a sly smile that she was helping my boyfriend realize he had alternatives and deserved better. I was angry at the way she stated it. We began yelling at one another, and I became so irate that I branded her a loser and said she was resentful because she wasn't performing as well as I was. That struck a chord. The words had a profound effect on her, and before I could respond, she snatched my hair and gave me a slap across the table. I was too shocked to react at first because we hadn't fought physically since middle school. However, the situation swiftly turned into a full-fledged altercation. My boyfriend and our parents had to break us up because we had gotten so violent. We were both bruised and scratched by the end, yet we were still yelling at one another. After attempting to reassure me the entire time, my partner was able to finally pull me away, get me into the car, and drive us home. I was glad to have him on my side since without him, the conflict might have lasted even longer. I didn't speak to my sister at all after that happened. We had argued before, but it had never been this savage. This was the last straw for me. It was already easier living apart from her, and I no longer felt compelled to think of her as a member of my family. Even though my sister wasn't prepared to apologize, my parents called me the day after the fight to let me know they had chastised her and hoped we might work things out in the end. I informed them that I was not interested in finding a solution. I wanted our connection to stay as it was, non-existent, and I didn't want anything to do with her anymore. I reminded my parents that they were partially responsible when they attempted to persuade me otherwise. They had, in a sense, encouraged our intense sibling rivalry while we were growing up and had never addressed it. My sister and I didn't want to be around each other, so they weren't shocked. They disagreed with me, so we got into a fight about it. They admitted their error and apologized over the phone a few days later. I forgave them, even though it felt a little empty at the time. I didn't want to break contact with my parents, even if I had decided to stop talking to my sister. That incident happened 6 years ago, and I haven't spoken to my sister since. As long as they don't put any pressure on me to get back together, I don't mind if she and my parents continue to have regular contact. We don't talk much, and even on holidays, we avoid each other, even though I've seen her at family gatherings. That's how I like it. We don't get along, and everyone in the family knows it, but nobody knows why. They just know that we got into a fight, and that none of us has looked good ever since. Then, after 6 years of concealing the information, I eventually came clean at my bridal shower. Because we weren't precisely adhering to traditional norms, my maid of honor only invited close friends and family, including my fiancé, to the ceremony. My parents surprised me by inviting my estranged sister as well. What they were thinking, I don't know. I was in disbelief when my folks showed up with her. My sister appeared just as shocked to see me, and a tense standoff occurred as the room went silent. My parents came over to us after what seemed like an eternity and said that enough time had gone by and that they hoped we could get back together. They thought we were now older and wiser. My sister's look made it obvious that our parents had deceived her into going. I told my parents that on such a significant day, they had no right to surprise me. I gently but forcefully requested my parents to accompany my sister on her departure before she could say anything. Instead of leaving, they insisted that I move on from the past while pretending that nothing important had occurred. Their contemptuous behavior angered me. I gave a detailed account of the full incident that occurred 6 years ago in order to correct the record. I asked whether everyone in the room believed I could just forgive and move on after making sure everyone knew exactly what had transpired. I then went to my parents and asked, would you still believe it was so easy to let go if I had married someone else? Of course, things would have turned out differently if I had wed someone else. However, when I first took him home to meet the family, my sister had shamelessly flirted with the man I was marrying, right in front of me. She had done it without guilt, as if he were a competitor in a competition he had never agreed to. She did all of that, but more than that, she attacked me first because I called her out on it and called her a loser. It was traumatic for me because I had never before experienced someone attempting to physically harm me in that manner. She never apologized to me in the 6 years that followed, acting as though nothing had happened. I didn't feel pressured to let go of the past or forgive her. I thought it was more crucial to keep myself safe and keep someone like her out of my life. It was ridiculous of my parents to think they could just take her to my bridal shower and expect us to get back together. Luckily, my sister recognized her error and departed before my parents could continue their argument. I imagine my sister wasn't happy about being duped too, so my mother followed her, probably to placate her. For a brief period, my father stayed with me, but I told him that he had let me down and that I didn't want to speak to him at that time. He got annoyed and accused me of being unreasonable, saying that I was acting like a brat and that it was pointless to cling to something that had happened 6 years before. I told him to go because I didn't want to quarrel with him, even though I didn't think I was being a brat. After a few minutes, he departed. I had to take a few moments to gather myself after that since I was so overwhelmed. Thankfully, I had the support of my fiancé and maid of honor, and I quickly returned to my normal self. Since I needed a diversion and didn't want to worry about my dad or sister, everyone else complied. We carried on with the festivities as if nothing had occurred. My fiancé and I went home after the encounter and didn't talk about it again. Since the incident, which happened around 5 days ago, I had not heard from my parents, but I was fine with it. After what they did, I thought we should take a break. I didn't anticipate hearing from them immediately, but they did finally get in touch, not to apologize, but to blame me for my sister's situation. My mom called this morning. When I replied, she told me to get in touch with my aunt and make sure she gave my sister the job she had been talking about. My mother was upset and scared, and I had no idea what she was talking about, so I told her to calm down. She continued by explaining that layoffs and downsizing at her prior workplace had left my sister unemployed for about 6 months. A few weeks ago, she realized she could no longer afford the rent and had to return to live with our parents. She had been looking for work, but she had not been able to locate a position that paid enough or that she enjoyed. My aunt, who was starting a new business, and my mother had talked about this. My aunt had originally decided to make my sister the head of marketing because she had prior marketing experience, but after the bridal shower incident when I told my aunt what had happened 6 years earlier, she stopped responding and finally canceled the offer. I wasn't shocked because I had always been my aunt's favorite, and I thought that was a reasonable explanation. My aunt replied that it was clear from her knowledge of the incident I recounted that my sister had serious anger management problems. When my mother forwarded her mail to me, the fact that my sister had not even apologized during the bridal shower infuriated my aunt. In addition, my aunt said that although she had originally decided to hire my sister due to their familial ties, she had just interviewed a better qualified applicant for the position. Instead, she made the decision to offer the job to the better qualified candidate. That made perfect sense to me, and I was really happy that my aunt had changed her mind. After receiving my aunt's note, I told my mother that there was nothing I could do about it. I wanted to avoid my aunt feeling pressured to recruit my sister just because they were related, as I had witnessed the detrimental impacts of nepotism in the workplace. It was evident that my aunt had identified a more qualified candidate for the position, which was the true reason my sister was not employed. I didn't want to get involved because my aunt was in charge of this. My mother became irate when I promised her that I wouldn't attempt to harm my sister's standing or reputation in the family at my bridal shower. She started screaming at me, saying that I had ruined my sister's chances by bringing up the past. Considering how much it would affect my sister, she said I didn't need to bring up the incident at my bridal shower. She said I deliberately portrayed my sister as unstable and evil in order to win the family's pity and position myself as the nice one. Just so you know, when I described the incident, I wasn't concealing anything. I freely acknowledged that prior to her physical assault, I had called her a loser, but I don't think her violent response was justified by the name-calling. My mother's accusation that I brought up the incident purely to harm my sister's reputation was unfair. After giving it some thought, I hung up the phone and blocked my parents. I wondered if it was the correct thing to bring up the past. My mother had claimed over the phone that I hadn't given my sister a fair opportunity to demonstrate her growth over the years, and that it was unkind of me to bring up the fight, particularly when it cost her a job offer. First update. Hello Reddit. I want to thank everyone who took the time to leave a comment before I talk about what transpired after my first post. Thank you very much for your guidance and good remarks. Since my sister had previously been prohibited from contacting me for 6 years, my parents were unable to get in touch with me directly after I blocked them. They chose to visit my home since they had no other choice. With my wedding just a few weeks away, I was overburdened and very busy getting ready. I had just gotten home from work that day, and my fiancé and I had a last-minute wedding dress fitting planned. I instructed them to go when they showed up uninvited. We knew that if we opened the door, they would continue the talk and aggravate me much more, so we didn't want to interact. They remained even after I threatened to contact the police. To be honest, I didn't want to contact the police since I didn't want to handle the problem that way, and it felt over the top. We agreed to let them in for a little talk, hear their side of the story, and end it there after talking it over with my fiancé. After deciding on a course of action, we let them in and warned them to hurry because we had other obligations. Thankfully, my folks quickly got to the point. They clarified that my behavior at the bridal shower was the reason my aunt had withdrawn her offer of employment to my sister. They said that I was to blame for my sister's situation and asked that I contact my aunt to make sure she was hired. I paid attention, but I didn't want to say it again since it was the same argument. I told them that since I had already called my mother, there was nothing I could do about it. It didn't make sense for them to come to my house and talk about it again since they knew I was busy and getting married in a few weeks. I was interrupted by my sister, who said they had come for reasons other than the job offer. This was our first chat in 6 years, so I was surprised. She continued by saying that she felt obligated to apologize, which is why she chose to come. At the moment, I was unsure of how to feel. To be honest, I had severe misgivings and didn't trust her intentions. I chose to be straightforward and inquired as to whether she sincerely wanted to apologize or if she was merely doing so in hopes of getting the job. I informed her that because I couldn't help her, there was no use in wasting her breath if it was only about the work. Although she appeared a little taken aback by my candor, she said that our parents were present to talk about the job and that she had come to apologize. Even my parents appeared astonished when I looked at them, indicating that they hadn't discussed this, but my sister seemed unconcerned. She reaffirmed that she had no interest in the job and was only there to apologize. She claimed to have thought back on her behavior during the previous 6 years, but she had always found an excuse not to apologize. She was unable to deny that she had mistreated me after the bridal shower. Her tone and manner conveyed that she was serious, even if my fiancé and I were still processing the situation. She said that she had harbored resentment toward me since she was a young child because she felt compelled to compete with me constantly. She felt guilty for squandering her childhood and adolescence on that rivalry now that she saw how pointless it was in the real world. She was sad that we could have become friends, given that I had tried to get in touch with her multiple times. Because she always viewed me as a rival, she acknowledged pushing me away. It was very overwhelming to hear her speak all of this, and I'm ashamed to say that I started crying as she expressed her emotions. She then turned to face my fiancé and expressed regret for the way she had behaved toward him during their one and only meeting. She admitted that it was long past time for her to apologize and that her preoccupation with outdoing me had caused her to lose sight of who she had become. When she was done, she didn't wait for a reply. She merely said that she needed to express herself and that we didn't have to forgive her. She promised not to disturb us again now that she had. Only my parents, my fiancé, and I remained in the room after she departed. We sat there in startled silence, trying to take in what had just transpired, none of us expecting this. My parents eventually departed without saying anything, and my fiancé and I went as scheduled to my fitting. Until we arrived home, we didn't talk about any of it. We started discussing my sister's apology approximately 30 minutes ago. Despite the 6-year delay, I thought my sister's apology was incredibly sincere and mature. My fiancé and I are still processing things, so we aren't sure if we should forgive her. I'm glad she recognized we could have been friends, and I've unblocked her, but I need more time to reassure her that everything is really okay. Second update. I neglected to include my parents in my last update. Since their visit a few days ago, they have not gotten in touch with us. Since they haven't expressed regret for what they did, we want to stay away from them because they encouraged, rather than resolved, the conflict between my sister and me. I consider them responsible. Their disregard for my sisters and my sentiments is evident, even after years of conflict and my attempts at forgiveness. We'll let them know in a few days that they won't be invited to the wedding. Third update. I was married last week, and it was a stunning, ideal day. My parents were not present, as was to be expected. They sent an email stating that they would not be attending, stating that they no longer wanted to be a part of our lives because my sister and I had stigmatized them. I don't mind if that's what they decide to do. On a more positive note, I contacted my sister prior to the wedding to welcome her to the event and to accept her apology. Having her there made the day even more memorable, and she accepted with grace. I'm happy to be getting back in touch with her, even if it's unbelievable to consider how far we've come. My husband and I are excited about our honeymoon, and life is better than ever. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.